Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Adventures in Crowdsourcing Incident Management Tools. Adventures in Crowdsourcing Engaging Navigation Providers. The second webinar in the EDC5 webinar series. My name is Nilu Parvinashtiani and I'll help facilitate today's webinar. This webinar is being sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration and hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence. As a reminder, if you don't know us already, on your screen right now you see a pod that's called Useful Links on the right side. So from there we've shared the links to our case studies, previous webinar recording, and a variety of resources on the transportation system management and operations, and also topics related to today's webinar can be accessed from there. So a few logistics for today's webinar. We are recording this webinar, and that recording, along with the presentation slides, will be available on NOCO's website on the on-demand learning section in the Knowledge Center. All attendees' phones are on listen-only mode by default, but we do have a discussion question pod that you can see on the screen right now, where you can use to insert your comments or any questions that you have during the webinar. At the end of the webinar, our moderator will go through each of those questions and will read them out loud to get answers from the presenters. So that's all I had. And with that, I would like to hand it over to our moderator for today, Paul Jordan. Paul?
Thanks, Niall. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Those of you that don't know me, I am Paul Joden with the Federal Highway Administration. I work with the Office of Operations, the Traffic Incident Management Program. And for this particular project, the Crowdsourcing for Operations, I am working with James Collier, who's technically the lead. I'm still the deputy lead on the Crowdsourcing EDC5 program, but we work together here. So you're stuck with me as the host today, and today's topic is engaging navigation providers, which is a good one. We have two experts today, and I'm not one of them. So we have Chris Lambert from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, who is increasingly in demand throughout the country because of his extensive knowledge with data and crowdsourcing, and in particular ways. So will be, is a wealth of knowledge I've come to discover. And then Kelly Wells from the North Carolina Department of Transportation, who will be talking about working with map providers, has some information she can share with us. So I'll just want to give a quick overview for, in case there's anyone on there that doesn't understand what everyday counts is, but and what the goal of this initiative. So this initiative is to is intended to increase the number of agencies that use crowdsourcing to better operate the system. And I apologize for reading that off the slide, but it actually should say a little bit more than that. It should say that regardless of where your state is, we would like to go to another level. So all these states signed up to go to improve, not just start the process, but wherever they're at, to get more sophisticated in the use of crowdsourcing. And we know that there's a lot of opportunities. Right now, the most common applications are listed below. I'm with the Incident Management Program, and I recommended crowdsourcing project for EDC5 because of what I had heard around the country when we were doing the everyday counts for 10 performance measures program, and just so many people were playing around with ways and in particular, but the other crowdsourcing applications, and could see the opportunities that in particular, for my world, the early notification of incidents and seeing incidents where you don't necessarily have ITS equipment. So, boy, there's some game-changing potential there, and I still believe that. And I'm even more encouraged by our work over the last several months since the beginning of 2000. On all the cool things that all these smart people, two of which we have today, are doing to advance the use of the data to expand what we can see happening on our system. So, but traffic signal management, we have some uses for that. Incident management, of course. Travel information is the most common use. Freeway management, road weather, there's some applications for road weather, and then there's some opportunities with maintenance management. We're not focusing too much on maintenance management for this one, but those are just some common uses that we've seen. So this is just sort of who signed up and where states want to end up at the end of this 2-year everyday counts period. So you can see 9 states want to make a big jump from a development stage to the assessment stage. And basically, the development is you're just starting to investigate what might work for us, how the approach, and demonstration is really you're taking something relative to crowdsourcing and sort of doing a pilot program, and then the next step would be to assess that pilot or expand on the demonstration stage. And then some states have identified themselves as institutionalized. I don't know that that's necessarily the case based on our definition at least, but people are really advanced in some of the things. And I won't read the whole chart to you, but you can see that there's a whole bunch of states that are looking to advance. I think 30 states signed up for this innovation, and then 6 states have asked for assistance that didn't sign up, so we consider ourselves having 36 states. Some resources or some opportunities with us. Today's webinar, of course, and then there's a webinar December 5th on vendor engagement. And one in January, which we haven't set a date yet for, which would be data management and use. We have workshops that are available for folks that might think it has value. We would need to discuss that with you. We can't obviously do one in every state, but there are some opportunities. So I would say reach out to James or myself, James Collier and myself, and we can have a conversation about a workshop if you think it's appropriate. Peer exchanges, we're already in the process of finalizing attendance for a peer exchange in Nashville, Tennessee in December on validation and filtering of crowdsourced data. And we're looking to have one in February, making the most of real-time vehicle probe data. We've talked to most of the states about these opportunities. On our calls, we've had 2 rounds of calls with all the states, and but if anything that you're not aware of, or you're not participating with your state necessarily, maybe we're not connecting with the right people, just reach out to us. We also offer on-site technical assistance in certain situations, training materials, and case studies. So, and then anything else that you think of that we didn't, we could look at that. There are potential funding opportunities. Each state gets a $100,000 a year opportunity to use what we call STIC funds, State Transportation Innovation Council. So each state has a STIC incentive council, and they can spend that $100,000 any way they want. Some states use the whole 100 on one particular project. Some states divvy it up between different projects. But if you have something you have an idea that you might need a little bit of money for, I know it's not a lot of money, but go to your state innovation council and they can you can make an application to them, and I think they're pretty flexible if you come up with a pretty idea. Some states are more competitive than others for getting that little bit of money. Also, there's the Accelerated Innovation Deployment, or AID demo grants, that is up to $1 million a year. Usually don't give out $1 million, but there's the potential is there, and those are bigger pots of money, but they only can give out a few each year, and they're basically projects that just that have a lot of potential, have proven value, but just need that extra oomph to get that extra push to get over the hump, so that more folks start to use it, and more, and you're able to, to further demonstrate the value of a particular innovation. So, with that, we like to advertise the EDC News, the weekly newsletter, our innovation monthly magazine. If you'd like to subscribe, the email address is there. I suspect that most folks on this already get that, but if we've missed you, let us know. And then if you'd like to send a text, there's that information too. So with that, James Collier and I, call James, not me. Just kidding. You can call me as well. But we're happy to talk to you and answer any questions that you might have and work with you. With that, I think we'll, if anyone has questions into the chat pod during the presentations, and we'll be happy to wait till the end so that we can have make sure we get all the speakers in. So, although there's only, but if you have a question, we'll be happy to do our best to answer them. With that, I think we'll. Chris Lambert from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet and our resident expert on many things data is up next.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so I'm Chris Lambert. I'm with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. I work in intelligent transportation systems. And we actually started using crowdsourcing back in 2014, and we used it on several different levels. And I'll walk through some scenarios that we use crowdsourcing in. For us, it was really more about coverage. We cover 26,000 miles of roadway, and we wanted to better understand what was happening on our roadway and the events that were happening out there for different issues, whether it's traffic incident management, situational awareness during events, or snow and ice events, or performance measuring, and there's a lot of different issues. So with that, go and get started. So I'll kind of start at the map editing, or with the map editing communities and our engagement with them. Everything kind of starts with the map in these different scenarios. That's kind of your anchor that makes all this data work together. So OpenStreetMaps is one of the mapping platforms that we use, and we primarily use OpenStreetMaps. If you notice any of our stuff on ArcGIS Online, you'll notice that OpenStreetMaps is typically used as a base map. And this really came into play a couple years ago. We had a bridge project in Louisville, and for the longest time, Google Maps was the only ones that showed that, and we don't license Google Maps, so I was looking for an alternative that was free for the state, and OpenStreetMaps was the only kind of freely available mapping platform that we saw that was maintaining itself and keeping up with the changes on our roadway network. So we started using OpenStreetMaps for all of our base maps after that. And I've just got some basic information there. They do have a web-based editor. They also allow you to edit the roadway network using GIS desktop tools. It is available as a default on ArcGIS Online. So if you want to layer, if you're licensed that platform and want to layer data on top of that, it can. And then I just threw in this release date for fun too, just to let everybody know that these things have been around for a while. It actually started in 2006. And then Waze. Of course, I'm a big Waze user in Kentucky. We signed our partnership back in September of 2014 with Waze, and that kind of got us into this crowdsourcing stuff. It kind of made us start thinking differently about our data and how to use that Waze data to add context to the other data that we had. And our aha moment was kind of during a snow and ice event one time. We had some Doppler radar that we had pulled in, and we also had Waze, and we started noticing on the Doppler radar when areas were green, people were reporting, like flooding on the roadway, and then as the Doppler changed and became white and pink, different people started to report things like ice on the road and heavy snow, and we kind of started to understand, watching that in real time and watching that kind of unfold, really kind of opened our eyes to the usefulness of the Waze data set. It's really great during emergencies, and any changes you make on the map also sync with the data feed. So if you change a road name or a route, or like a direction of a route, all those things are reflected in the data feed within minutes, actually. And so my director one time called and he said, hey, we're on the way back from Western Kentucky, that we've got a bridge closure and we just opened it this afternoon. Does Waze know about this? And I said, well, probably not yet. So I forwarded the message to the Waze map editing community, and within 15 minutes, my director had called or texted me back, and he said, that was awesome, that's great. And I said, what? And he said, it's already rerouted us to go over the bridge that you just removed the closure on. So within 15-minute time period, they were already rerouting traffic. So it's very responsive. And we have access to that platform as an agency, but we really engage the editing community there as well. Believe it or not, it was actually released in 2006 as a product called FreeMap in Israel, and then it kind of grew from there. And they use Slack and Discord, and I'll get into some of that here in just a second. So communicating with Waze during an event, Slack is used with Waze management and a lot of the Waze points of contact and team leads. So there's quite a few of us that use Slack to communicate. And then the actual map editing community uses Discord. And as you can see, they've got different channels. They've got a Kentucky closure channel. They've got a Carolina channel. They've got different channels. And for the Kentucky closures, it's actually really interesting. These guys are really innovative and active. They actually pull in all of our tweets from our different Twitter accounts, and they pull those in, and there's people always active during the day and night and every other hour that are making those edits as they see things released to social media. So very, very active community, very responsive. Here, we also use Here Data, and here's kind of a hybrid solution. We license the Here traffic data, but Here also has a map editing community as well. And what's nice about that is that you can change the geometry. So if you're having issues with maybe one of their roadway segments not matching one of your roadway segments, if you're doing a lot of stuff with your linear referencing system, you can actually go in and make that change yourself. And they do quarterly updates to their shapefile, and they that again is synced to your data. So every quarter you can go download a new shapefile, and then that real-time data feed has a TMC ID, and you continuously sync their data through to that line segment. And then they also, just as a side note, Here is one of the members of the US DOT work zone harmonization effort, and they've agreed to use, if you publish your work zones in that format, Here is one of the agencies that have agreed to consume and use that data format. So again, that's just another way to communicate with that platform. And then we really, during events or any time actually, we really ask for assistance from our citizens. You'll also notice anytime we post about Waze, we ask that passengers report issues. That's the way we kind of look at things, is that we don't want our drivers making reports, obviously, and using their phone, but there's a lot of passengers out there, and we kind of hope that they can give us useful information while being entertained at the same time. So here's some of the data sources that we collect on a regular basis. You notice I've got the crowdsourcing ones in red. So we also bring in social media reports from Twitter. We use Cocoros, etc., and I'll get into some of those. But In all, we process about 3.1 billion records per year of real-time data, and we match all of those to our linear referencing system, so we have a district, county, route, and mile point for all of those records that we receive from any of those different data sources. So I'll start out with a couple scenarios where we have used Waze. First and foremost, incident detection. If you've ever heard me on a webinar, I always talk about our incident detection. We've been doing this since 2015, and really this is our method of kind of eliminating some of the noise, right? So we want to be able to find actionable information out of our data, and so we were trying to detect when crashes occurred and try to get early notification of those. If you notice, I'm not sure if it's really visible on your all screens, but if you notice the traffic, the green lines kind of at the top, I've circled those in purple. That's our traffic speeds, and this is every 2 minutes. So this is graphed every 2 minutes across a section of roadway. And so the green lines at the top represent our cardinal, non-cardinal direction speeds. So you can see the speeds, they start fluctuating quite a bit. And then kind of down below, we've got some dots down there. Those dots are that's the number of reports of different type of incidents coming in from Waze. So we have people complaining about jams, and we also have people reporting crashes. And in the very bottom gray area, that's when our script picked that up. We have a script that runs every 2 minutes and identifies anomalies on the roadway. It's actually comparing crowdsourcing against the HERE probe data, and when there's an agreement, it writes a record and continues to write that record as long as that agreement exists between the data feeds. And then the blue area where I've circled the shaded kind of yellow background area that I've circled there in blue is actually when our traffic management center was notified about the event. So you can see the lapse in time between the time that we were able to actually detect the incident versus the time that it was actually reported to our agency. So one of our scenarios is the I-75 snow and ice, and I'll call it just an issue. In 2016, we ended up with 30 miles of roadway that had come to a complete stop, and there were 3,000 people stuck on our roadway, and so that caused quite an issue. And what I've got here, what I've got displayed is over on the far left, you'll see just the impact of that overall traffic jam or delay or blockage closure. And then it's just some of the chat that takes place on the roadway. At one point, there was a little bit of confusion about what was actually happening on our road, and our director of maintenance at the time, he told me, he said, "Listen, just open up the Waze map and just start reading comments. Let's just find out when things are moving and who's moving and where they're moving and that kind of stuff." So we started looking through the chit chat that's available on Waze is actually not part of your data feed, so that's something you just have to monitor in real time, and that's what we did. We just pulled up the map and started looking at the map chat features, the little green bubbles across the map, and that gave us better awareness about what was happening. So on that particular event, we actually utilized the Waze Crisis Center. Waze is, they will spin up some employees and they'll keep them on 24/7. We actually pushed out shelter locations in this area. So in addition to working with our Waze map editing community to close down certain routes that were congested, and the reason you close those down is because any incoming traffic to that area, they're diverted around that. So when our map editors close those routes, they're no longer available for people that are using the app to travel on. So we also pushed out shelter locations using the Crisis Center. We literally were just emailing them, emailing some of the personnel in Tel Aviv about the different Red Cross shelter locations that we had available, and they actually did the data entry for us. So it was very, very easy. Anytime we got a report from Kentucky Emergency Management or local law enforcement, we would literally just forward those to the Ways Crisis Center, and the Ways Crisis Center would go ahead and add those to the map and make those available to travelers. Anyone typing in the word help had those shelter locations available, and you can route directly to a shelter location. So we also had an eclipse in 2017. I was working this incident as well, and NASA told everybody that one of the best viewing places for the eclipse was this little place in Kentucky, and population of about 28,000, and we had several 100,000 people that showed up to that location, to that little town, and it caused quite a stir. So everybody seemed to get there safely, but then when the event was over and everybody was trying to leave, that's when things got bad. So you see the Waze alerts. We've got 340 Waze alerts. On a normal day, we typically have somewhere between 30 and 40 alerts. So our number of alerts were just tenfold what we normally have. But what's great about this is it allows us that situational awareness throughout the state. So even this real small little incident over here in the far eastern part of the state, we were able to monitor that as well, in addition to all the mess that was happening in western Kentucky. So this is an example of just kind of, again, situational awareness and being alert and using crowdsourcing data during an emergency event. This particular roadway section, I was kind of just monitoring, just kind of looking around the map, and I noticed several reports of accident in the same area. I zoomed into this. I asked the gentleman at the table, the transportation station, I said, do we have any reports of this crash? And he said, no, I just talked to an officer. There's nothing there. I said, okay. Well, not too long after that, about 15 minutes actually, we got a report in that there was a crash in that area. And that kind of taught us a lesson about the timeliness of the reports. And when you talk to someone in the field and they say, well, we just checked it, and then you turn around and tell somebody, well, we just checked it, you know, that's relative. That's kind of that's a relative thing to say. So it may be true that officer may have gone through there just 15 or 20 minutes prior, but then you end up with 5 reports of a crash all within about 5 minutes of each other, and then it takes another 15 minutes to get back to the emergency management center. So this is really great for us. Now, the downside was that in the after-action review, some of our emergency management people are really trying to grasp and understand how to best utilize these apps during events. It's great for situational awareness, but we had a plan for people to leave the area. And naturally what happens with people using navigation apps is that when things get congested, they immediately get diverted to a different route. And some of our emergency management people saw this as a problem. In other words, this is a nuisance. People using Waze and Google Maps is actually a nuisance to them. And so what we've decided to do in the future is we're going to actually try to post what I call supported routes. And we're going to proactively publish shelter locations on routes where we know we're going to be stationed. And this will help if you do have a medical issue, or if you've got children with you, you may want to go ahead and stay on those routes knowing that we have locations available along those routes. If you don't care about that and you just want to keep moving, you know, obviously you just continue using your app and it will divert you until it finds the least congested route and will continue you on your way. So that's kind of our way to, because the mapping applications or the navigation apps, they don't want to change their algorithms just because you have an event or an emergency. So that's kind of our way to kind of game the system, if you will, or kind of hack their apps, is just to go ahead and proactively provide those shelter locations. And then roadway weather, we actually do a lot with roadway weather in Kentucky. This is something that Our weather varies quite a bit. If you're familiar with the area, so in the winter of 2012 and 13, for example, we had 44 call-outs, where we had 44 activations of statewide forces. Last year, though, we only had 14. And our winter season is typically 26 weeks. So the one year we've got 44 call-outs in 26 weeks, and the other year, we only have 14, 15 in the same time period. So this is an example. Again, I was at the Emergency Operations Center. They're going to stop letting me work emergency ops when I seem to draw these things in. The top chart there is just kind of our index for showing we had some flooding events on our roadway. We had a lot of roads being closed due to high water, and there was a lot of agencies trying to coordinate data, and we finally just posted to social media, to KYTC's Facebook page, and asked for assistance from Waze users. And you can see the response. You can see that bar chart jumping. That's our number of records per day. So our number of records per day literally doubled and stayed that way for the next 5 days throughout that event. At the bottom, similar scenario where we had a lot of strong winds that passed through the state, and we started talking about trees being down and blocking roadways, and that actually came in through Twitter. We were actually pulling in information from different news stations and some different people that we know and different KYTC users, and so those are the Twitter reports of trees or downed trees that were coming in. So again, just trying to make sense of information and data that you have available on social media. And then there's what those flooding reports look like. When we were at the operations center, we were able to map those very quickly. And if you notice, even in eastern Kentucky, which most people will tell you that eastern Kentucky is not really known for their heavy use of technology, and but out there we still had a lot of reports of roads being closed due to flooding and things. And we made that available. We made this map available, this dashboard. We threw that together in about 15 or 20 minutes and made that available to our Kentucky Emergency Operations Management as they were working the event. And then we also use Cocoros. These guys are great. They're certified weather reporters, and we take that information and we interpolate that across the state so that we understand the total snowfall. You only get this once per day, but again, it's a crowdsourcing. It's a form of crowdsourcing. These are volunteer but certified weather reporters. And we take that information, and as you can see, we map that out as well so that we have a better understanding of what we're up against during snow and ice events. So that volunteer community is extremely valuable to us, and we've reached out to them several times to let them know that we're using their information during snow and ice events. So they're very active during those events. And then this is another use of crowdsourcing data to try to understand our own operations and gauge our response during snow and ice. The red shaded area is actually our SALT distribution, so that's our AVL activity, our automatic vehicle location information. So that's our activity. And then behind that in the bar graphs you see Waze reports of ice on the road and accidents and things. If you see that our activity matches fairly well with the activity that people are reporting. Obviously, in the future, we hope to get out in front of that and stay ahead of that and be proactive in our response to weather events. And then we kind of bring it all together. This was last slide. We kind of bring it all together in this snow and ice decision support dashboard, where we bring together again the OpenStreetMaps as our background, as our base map, and then we've got different forms of crowdsourcing data on top of that to try to make sense of what's happening on our roadway. So the Waze reports are all filtered with thumbs up greater than 1. So that way we have a higher reliability on those reports, and then we also have those separated into crashes versus environmental issues like ice on the road or flooding, etc. And then we also do an internal crowdsourcing amongst our maintenance staff. We provided a SharePoint list that any of our maintenance staff can go into and report the environmental conditions like snowfall, heavy rain, number of inches of snowfall, etc. They can report this stuff through a SharePoint site, and all that information is aggregated as well as a form of crowdsourcing. So During an event, we've got 120 county offices, and we've got 12 district offices, and then we've got several people stationed at central office, and all those people have access to that list, and any of them can update that list based on the information they have about any particular county, and then all that information is rolled up at the same time and then distributed to management across the state. So we kind of really embrace this whole idea of crowdsourcing, and we do that ourselves now. And there's my contact information. Those will be in the slides. I don't know where I am for time, but I certainly appreciate the time and attention today. And if you need anything else, please contact me. And thank you so much for letting me talk today.
No, thank you, Chris. Great presentation as usual. There is some questions in the chat pod, but if you don't mind, I think we'll go to Kelly right now. Sort of just the way I prefer to do it, and have Kelly do her presentation. And in the meantime, you can be looking at these answers, and if they require a short, answer in the chat pod, Chris. Otherwise, we can wait till the end. I'm sure we're going to have enough time. With that, if you don't mind, Kelly, take it away.
Okay, I'm ready to go. All right, folks, mine is actually sort of the flip side of what Chris just told you about. So where Chris is talking about how Kentucky was able to use crowdsourced information, I'm going to share with you kind of our experience in getting information in the other direction. You know, we know citizens are using all these apps and all these maps, and what if the information that they're providing isn't always right? What do you do and how do you work through that? So that's really what my presentation is about. So I'll tell you first a little bit about my role so you can see how all this sort of converges, and then I'll talk about our experiences from Hurricanes Matthew and Florence and how really what we learned through those storms led to a day-to-day process that we use. I just had somebody call me about it this morning before this webinar, so it's something that we're using more and more day-to-day. And then I'll just share sort of some recent cases, the good, the bad, and the ugly of when it works great, when it doesn't work so well, and then also some things that we haven't quite figured out yet. So I'm the Traveler Information Engineer at NCDOT. We manage a homegrown drivenc.gov website. It is a homegrown road closure reporting system. Just like Chris said, I had never thought about it as crowdsourced, but it's sort of what he described. We allow about 1,000 different users across NCDOT to enter information into our website. When we first started, we didn't have a statewide operations center, and we had to provide real-time traveler information. So we just made a web-based system, 20 years ago, where people could go in all across, our maintenance engineers, our construction engineers, and enter information into our website directly. So we still do that today. We use a Bing base map, and you'll hear in a few minutes why that's important. And we also send out notification emails. We also do tweets, and we also have an API that feeds out the information that's entered into our traveler information website. We manage the NC511 phone system, which is a little bit unique here because we actually use live operators. We switched a few years ago from an IVR to a system where the inmates at the women's prison in South Raleigh are trained to use our website, and then they answer 511 phone calls. So it's still a big part of how we do business. We get about 100 calls a day, so it's still something that we use. It certainly spikes during events like Matthew and Florence. And then lastly, I manage the probe speed data. So we've been a member of the Vehicle Probe Project through the I-95 Corridor Coalition for over 10 years now. And when we first bought this data, it was really initially, I thought, oh, we'll use this for traveler information. We bought data on I-95 only, and we said, oh, we'll color I-95 red, yellow, or green on our website, and that will tell people, a little bit more about traveler information. Well, now we use it for all kinds of TSMO activities. We use it for performance measurement. We use it for project prioritization. So it's really become a big use here at DOT. But really what I'm going to tell you is a combination of all of these three things that we do and how they all sort of came together to work with these mapping companies. So I'll start with Hurricane Matthew. Flashback to October 2016, we had Hurricane Matthew. We hadn't had a really significant hurricane in about 15 years, so we were a little bit out of practice, and some things we had put in place, 15 years before after our last big storm had sort of fallen a little by the wayside, so we did our best. We were not Ways Connected Citizen members yet. We were in the process of doing that. And what sticks out in my mind from Hurricane Matthew was we are located in the Statewide Emergency Operations Center. We're co-located here with our Highway Patrol, NCDOT, and Emergency Management. And so the Highway Patrol folks would catch us in the halls and they would say, DOT, you got to help us. We're having a huge problem out in the field. And they said, you know, I-95 is closed. You can see it in the picture there. And people keep coming up to the closure, and we say, hey, you know, the officer will say, ma'am, you got to take the detour. This road is closed. And an hour later, the same person comes back. And they say, ma'am, we told you that this road was closed. And they say, yeah, but this is what my GPS tells me to do. So it was this kind of aha moment like, oh, my goodness, we have all these citizens, and this information is not getting to the apps that they're using. And this wasn't a one-time thing. This went on for a few days. And the Highway Patrol just sort of begged us, like, you've got to fix this. We're spending all our time and energy trying to route people because their GPS keeps sending them back into the flooded areas. So that was kind of that's the first thing I remember about this issue of how do we communicate with these companies when they're telling people something that isn't correct. So I'm going to wait a second because you're going to read my chart if I put it up there. So what we did is we began to try to figure out how different companies get their information. And so the chart I'm about to show you is really my best understanding of how all of this works, okay? So let me give you that little preface. This information changes every time I read something from Bernie Wagenblast's newsletter, or I read an article, or I hear something. I update this chart very, very often. Like, for example, I've just heard recently that Apple is not going to use TomTom maps anymore. They're going to start making their own maps. So those are the kind of things I'm keeping an eye on. And if you know anything better than what I have here, please, if you know something and I give my example and it's not right, please, by all means, let me know. But what we're doing is you start on this chart on the right-hand side with the end user, because people will come and they will say, hey, I have a problem with my blank, right? So say they say, hey, I have a problem with my Garmin. Well, you know, very quickly I learned you're not going to call Garmin and say, hey, there's a problem with your device. So I started this chart to kind of show, I call it the ecosystem of how all of these systems work as best I understand it. And what I learned very quickly is there's three sort of fields in these companies that you have to figure out where the data comes from. So the first one is the navigation and routing, and as you can see, it's very empty because I've learned over the years that it is a black box. Just like Chris was saying, they're not going to change their routing algorithms for you. So the routing is sort of just a placeholder right there. But the column to the left of that is mapping, and I totally agree with what Chris said about mapping is super important. You can put incident information and you can put traffic flow information, but if your base map isn't correct, you're never going to get the whole story. So I've cobbled together this list of where these different end users get their base map. So if you're trying to figure out something, you have to start with the people that originate the map, have them fix their base map, and then you can see if it carries through to these other products. Then in the column to the left of that, it's how do they get their incident information and where do they get their traffic flow information. And then the next column is how do they interface with us. You know, some of them use our API. Like Chris was saying, we can use Waze Map Editor. Some of them just get our emails. They have different ways that they get our information. So what I do is when someone says, hey, you know, how come my OnStar is wrong, or how come my, like I said, Apple Map is probably my favorite. How come my Apple Map is wrong? Well, Apple Map uses TomTom as a base map. So the first thing I do is I go and I check TomTom. Well, then if their incident information is wrong, I know that they get that information from TrafficCast. So I go back to TrafficCast and see if TrafficCast has the right information. So it really is just sort of cobbling together little pieces of information I've learned and then figuring out where to go when we have a problem. All right, so that all developed in about 2016, 2017, and then in 2018 we had Hurricane Florence. We had 2,574 road closures, and I remember this because when we first built our incident reporting system, our maximum query size was 2,000. And so the day that I came to work and I could no longer pull a query, you know, the question I get asked all day long is how many roads are closed, how many roads are closed, and I built this great query and I've used it for, you know, 16 years. And all of a sudden I couldn't query because we then had 2001 roads closed and my query didn't work anymore. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is big. So it was big. We worked countless days. We were Waze CCP members. And we had that chart that talked about how we coordinate, so we were better off than we were in Matthew for sure. We also actually began to do proactive checking. So we had someone here who every time he came in, his first job was to check all the interstates, make sure all the major map companies had the information correct, check the U.S. routes and check some NC routes as well. I don't know if I said this yet. I think it's in the upcoming slide, but we are like Kentucky. We're a huge state DOT. We maintain 80,000 miles of road. So you might be saying, well, we don't feel some of these things you're talking about, but when you maintain 80,000 miles of road, everybody comes to you, right? When there's a problem with a road in your state, everybody comes to us. So it's just, you have to think about the scale. So the good news is it worked really well. Our process during Hurricane Florence, the Highway Patrol guys said, you know what, it's so much better than it was in Matthew. We don't know what you're doing, but just keep it up. So we were really proactively checking, and we thought everything was going well until we each had to pull an overnight shift here at our 24/7 operations center. So I had pulled my overnight shift, and I got up and I went home to sleep for a few hours, and I came back. And I saw, I knew we had been doing this no drive zone, right? So basically in the shaded area of our state, the conditions were so bad and so volatile that we were telling people you should not travel at all in this portion of the state. And people would call, we had 27,000 phone calls. People would call and say, I need to get here, I need to get there. And we would say, ma'am, we do not advise that you drive at this time. We're trying to get emergency supplies into the affected areas. We cannot guarantee the changes in the road conditions. We need you to not drive for these 3 days. So that sounds well and good. But as I come back from my little morning nap back to work, I see this press release, and it basically says, DOT says, don't trust your GPS. And it about broke my heart because we had worked really hard to have good relationships with these companies to have the information flow well. But when you look at it, we're the DOT saying it's not safe, don't drive, and these companies are saying, well, we want to provide the best information we can. So they knew our point closures, and they wanted to tell people, their algorithms allowed people to navigate between these closures. So it was a little bit of a mixed message, and for me, it was the worst day of the storm. But we got through it, and, we went back afterwards and kind of said, how can we do this better? But I'd like to think that this no drive zone, it's never happened in the 20 years I've been doing this, so I'm really hoping it doesn't happen again because it was a really hard message to convey to our partners and to the citizens. So now with all that said, like I said, we learned all this through hurricanes. So how does this apply to day-to-day use? And it really does. Like I said, we have 80,000 miles of road, so we get a lot of this happening. And I would say 3 or 4 times a month, I have somebody in DOT come to me and say, hey, I know you work with these mapping companies. I need your help. So I was doing it so much that we've created a draft NCDOT policy that is how to work with mapping providers. And what we tell people is if you have a temporary closure, if you're doing a work zone or a bridge closure or something like that, make sure it's in our website, and they're supposed to do that anyway. And that's our best mechanism to get temporary closures to these companies. So that's kind of the easy part. The second part is mapping changes. When you have a base map change, and I simply created a table that only has that mapping column, and it says, if you think the Apple map is wrong, or if you know that the map on your iPhone is wrong, you probably want to go ahead and check the Garmin, check the TomTom map, and check the Here map. So I give them the list of all the mapping companies we know about so that when they're fixing one of those mapping problems, they can go ahead and check all the others and try to fix them as well. So these are some of the experiences that we've had. My favorite one is when one of my coworkers called me on Friday afternoon and he said, hey, we're opening a brand new stretch of interstate. We're still building interstate here. We're still a building state. I'm opening this brand new stretch of interstate over the weekend. It would be so great if it was on Google Maps on Monday. And I was like, oh, sure, no problem. We'll get right on that. So I've been trying to tell people, let me know early. We have told companies early of new roads we know are opening so they can get it into their process. They've even driven the roads before they're open to get all the coordinates. So new road openings is something we handle. Local governments, we had a case where I think a lady almost lost her job because Google Maps hadn't yet changed the name of a business park. And these businesses were putting the new name of their business park, but none of the people could find it. And she said to me, I think I'm going to lose my job if I don't find a way to get Google Maps to change what they call this street. So we helped her a little bit with that. Citizens come to us all the time and say, hey, we're having problems with people being routed incorrectly. We have a lot of Christmas tree farms, and we have these secondary roads, and these navigation apps will see a shorter route, between where they are and this Christmas tree farm, but these are certainly not roads that tractor trailers should be going down. So you get these citizens saying, I get these tractor trailers, they're turning around in front of my house in this, 2-lane road. How can you help me? We get people saying, I have a private road, and Google keeps routing people. I don't mean to always keep saying Google. And people keep getting routed down these roads. This road is a dead end. It used to not be a dead end. It's still used for routing to another location. Businesses, we've had a case recently where we worked really hard to do a good work zone and accommodate the businesses in the area of the work zone. But on one of the navigation apps, the work zone was drawn incorrectly. So when people were trying to get to this business, it appeared as if they could not get to the business. So what's interesting is in reality there was access, but when people went to use their decision-making tool, it appeared that there wasn't access. So the business owner was upset. You told me you would provide access, but now this app is telling people they can't get to my business. So it's real life. It's things that are happening day in and day out. So we've been able to take this process that we created and we learned out of hurricanes and actually use it for real day-to-day stuff. Now, one thing, I'm not a GIS person. It sounds like Chris is a GIS guy, but you might think, well, wait a minute, isn't this a GIS process? Isn't there a process for public agencies to talk to these mapping companies? And what we've learned in doing this is, yes, there certainly is. But a lot of times traffic operations moves faster than the bureaucracy of a DOT. So we had a case during the hurricane where we had a primary route, US 17, and then we had built the US 17 bypass, but it had just opened to traffic. It hadn't been updated in our GIS systems. So the old US 17 was flooded and traffic was using the new US 17, but in certain mapping companies, they didn't have that new route. So it got really confusing with people saying US 17 is closed. No, it's not. Yes, it is. It just came down to the base map issue. And eventually our GIS would get updated and eventually people would get that information. But we started a conversation with our GIS unit saying, how do we get this information out quicker? We can't wait until all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed to get this information out. We actually had one years ago where we built a brand new bypass, and it took 5 years for that bypass to show up in most of the navigation apps because some paperwork hadn't been done somewhere, and it took almost 5 years. So we certainly can't wait 5 years for navigation apps to be able to use new roads like Chris was saying. So I'll give you a good, bad, and ugly. A good example of what we've been able to do, there's a major interstate closure in the central part in Winston-Salem. We call it Business 40, and it's a multi-year full closure of a main freeway that goes through Winston-Salem. So this is one of those cases where we got with all the people in my contact list. We said, hey guys, on Saturday morning we're going to close the highway. It's going to be closed for 18 months or whatever. And we made sure everybody had the information proactively. It was also going to be our first thing that we entered ourselves into the Waze map editor. But we have amazing Waze volunteers in our state, and they beat us to it. They put it in the day before, and we were like, wait, we wanted to do that. We wanted to have our first full Waze closure that we entered. But we also, for this project, we do weekly proactive checks. So we look at the major map providers and we look at places where maybe they have, sometimes I've found with these closures, they'll put them in well, but taking them out doesn't always work as smoothly. I think some of them actually have preset times they let things live for, and your thing could end before or after that, and they're not as good as taking things out. So we're proactively checking on this project every week to make sure the major apps have our information correct so we can minimize the impact of this project. Similarly, we had a new toll road open last year, and we were really good about getting to the companies and letting them know, hey, there's going to be this new way into Charlotte. You can take this toll road that gets you to Charlotte. And we were all happy. It showed up quickly and everybody was happy. Well, that was until the secretary started getting letters from citizens and businesses saying that they were getting redelivery fees of $20 and $50 because the roads that were cut off when we built the expressway, when we built the toll road, the maps hadn't been updated to reflect those roads. So they were very upset. I didn't do a very good example, but say, for example, this blue road before the expressway was built, maybe this blue road had this alignment, and then once we build the expressway, we actually fixed it. So these two roads actually have the same name. So here's part one of the road, and here's part two. Well, if someone goes to deliver, and they deliver on this new part, or they deliver on the old part and they don't realize we've done this realignment, of course they're not going to be able to find the business or the citizen. So they someone made a comment that kind of cut me to the heart, and they said, you did a great job of telling them about your road, but you didn't do such a great job of telling them about my road. And I thought, yeah, okay, so think about the whole impact to the area and all the changes to all the roads. So that was a little bit of humbling there to think about, the holistic impact of when we build new roads. So the last thing I'll share with you is this idea of truck routing, and it is the place that we continue to scratch our head. Actually, this morning I had a call about this very issue. This morning's case was, there's a big work zone on I-77 coming out of Virginia, and when traffic starts to back up, Google sends people through this little town, and the little town is very upset. It's tearing up their pavement. It's causing all kinds of congestion in their town. What can DOT do so that Google doesn't route people through our town? So I went to them and I said, look, we really can't, number one, we can't change the routing algorithm like Chris said, but really it just brings the bigger idea of trucks to a head. And trucks is the place that I've gotten a call from all 14 of our divisions by now saying we have a problem with trucks. And I think the problem is that truckers are using Waze and Google and their iPhone, which were never designed for truckers. And people say to me, well, can you tell Waze this? Can you tell, and I'm like, guys, this isn't their product. Just because someone uses a product for its unintended use, you can't go back to the manufacturer and say, well, can you fix your product because it's not doing what someone wants to do with it? So it's been really, really difficult. We do know that here in TomTom do have truck products, so when we have a problem, this is an example just last week, trucks were getting hung up on this railroad grade crossing in the top picture, and so we wrote to TomTom and they said, is there a sign? And we said, yes, there's a sign, and they said, okay, we can code it. For some reason they had missed it and they hadn't coded it as a low clearance crossing, so we got that one at least in the process to be fixed. Another thing we do sometimes that I still scratch my head about is when we do give detours on projects, we give detours that are suitable for trucks, but they might be really, really long, and they're really not necessary for everybody. Cars could use a shorter detour, but we want to be, correct. We want to make sure everyone can use these detours, so there's always this disconnect between these long, excellent detours and really something that's smaller, but most people are going to use their app and get routed on. So that's kind of our quandary, is how do we get good truck information? How do we get information when trucks aren't where they should be? How do we get that information to them? So I'd like to do a research project on that hopefully next year and get someone to dig into those issues. What apps do truckers use and how do we get better information to those apps? So with that, I'll wrap up. Like I said, the main takeaways are we developed contacts and processes that work for our state. It helps us both during day-to-day, and it certainly made a huge difference during our last big event. And I'm still kind of scratching my head about how we do a better job with getting trucks routed in the best possible place. And that's it.
That's it. Well, I learned a lot there. One is you guys are still building roads.
Yeah.
I didn't think anyone, who does that? Who's doing that?
Yes, I know.
and that state DOTs can be a big, bad bureaucracy. And I'm joking about the second one, of course.
Right.
Many years in a state DOT, but but I honestly I have heard about my travels, people frustrated with the flooding issues where roads are identified as either not flooded or flooded, way behind what has actually happened. And so I'm glad you've kind of worked through some solutions, potential solutions there, and explained it to others. So it's pretty significant. People actually have called me during events and asked if I had any ideas, and I'm just going to send them to Kelly from now on. So.
Well, we're happy to help.
Well, I appreciate that. So we have some questions, a couple that are directed at you, and let's start from the bottom up. That one's for Chris. Hold on.
I've been trying to answer mine as we go. That way she'll have time to answer hers.
Yeah, I see that. Yep.
I can answer Jenny's if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so good question. Do you see our staff working with third-party providers to maintain data integrity? I'll tell you, I'll be honest, there's a little this difference of opinion here at my DOT. Some people think, these are private companies. Why are you doing their work for them? Which I totally understand. But I always have to keep coming back to, at the end of the day, these are our citizens, and they're trying to use these tools to navigate. So I want to provide the best information out of our systems that will help them do what they do, right? I know nobody goes to my website when they're going to navigate. They just don't. They don't download my little website. They go to Google and Waze and all these companies. So I see it as a role. We're still trying to figure out what that looks like in our operations center. We actually started a thing where we're counting how many times the providers have this information versus us telling them. So that's a great question, and I don't have a good answer because it's kind of evolving. And I would be happy to post those draft policies. I think I can link it, or I'll talk to the organizers of this, and we'll find the best way to share those documents.
Kelly, I can speak to that too. We have the same issue here. One of our folks here said, when do I get my check from Google? Because I'm doing all their work for them. We get those type of negative comments as well. Our management, though, what we've decided and agreed on is we want to meet users where they are, and they're using these apps, and we're gonna make our data available to them and do everything we can to push our information to them. That way, these people using these apps, they can make the best decision possible based on the information that they have at their fingertips.
Thanks, guys. Ginny also had another question. Is your policy on temporary closures and map changes available?
Yeah, I said I can send that to Nilu, and maybe we can figure out a way to best get that to everybody so they can take a look at it.
And I think there was a question early on, are these presentations available? The whole webinar is recorded in associated PowerPoints. I do think, Nilo, it takes a little bit of time, though, before we have it ready to be posted. Is that correct?
Yeah, so usually within a few days we post the recording, but right now on the screen there's the download pod, and all 3 presentations are there in PDF format for download here.
Okay, excellent.
So if I put my draft policy up there right now, would people be able to download it?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll do that then while we're talking.
Perfect. There you go. We aim to please here. So my old friend Mike Fitzpatrick has a question from Massachusetts. Can you publish the roster GPS mapping contracts, please?
Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll put up that slide that has that matrix, and then I'll put up the draft policy and the attachment. I'll put all those 3 things up. So if you can give him a question, it'll give me a minute to to do that.
Oh, Chris, a question? Oh no,
yeah.
You got to do 2 things at once.
I've tried to answer as many of the questions as I could. We've had some questions about validation of data, etc. Some of this we've had to learn the hard way, just to be completely honest. We kind of found out that through GIS clustering, it kind of looked like thumbs up greater than 1. There's certain incidents where instead of giving somebody that thumbs up, other people want to report their own version of it, the same incident and things, so maybe crashes or ice on the road. So we found that 40% of our reports were either at or started at a 0 thumbs up. So we just go ahead and filter those out, and it doesn't seem to have affected anything, so we feel really confident about that. And then we also, for crashes, of course, we're validating the 2 data sources against each other. So we're not just spamming our traffic management centers saying that there's issues here. We're actually forcing that other data feed at that specific mile point to agree with that report before we send something out. So for the crash reports, we actually filter with a thumbs up greater than 1, and there has to be a drop in speeds of about 50% or so. It's actually a jam factor. There's a jam factor in the here data called jam, or there's a field in the here data called jam factor. It's a 0 to 10 rating, and we do jam factor greater than 5, and then thumbs up greater than 1 on the reports, and that's what generates the alert.
Thanks, Chris. Kelly, you ready for another question?
Sure.
Another friend, Ed Mark, he wants to know if you had any experience with advising navigation providers about low clearance bridges in order to reduce bridge hits. But, I must admit that New York City probably has more bridges to worry about than North Carolina, but
True.
but
I haven't done that one
New York's
specifically.
New York's had that issue for a long time, if I recall, the bridge hits.
Yeah, I haven't done that one specifically. I know it's an issue here, but it really goes back to like the clearance problem that I was telling you about before. The idea is who are these trucks supposed to be using for navigation? We know they're using Google and their iPhones, but those companies aren't going to say, hey, if you're a truck, be careful, there's a low clearance bridge. And they're not going to tell everybody, hey, be careful, there's a low clearance bridge. So really trucks are the great mystery of how we get that information out better.
Kelly, do you have any relationship with pre-pass?
I've thought about that. We've talked about that, using those weigh-in-motion providers, right? Actually, we had one of them come and talk to us, and that was kind of something we kicked around. Like, would that be a good way? The people that use those systems, could we get our information to them? So we have started to think about that.
They you can contact me later. We're actually working with them on some interfaces. We're providing roadway weather and some other information, but bridge clearance and restriction and work zone restrictions is part of that interface as well.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Chris, there was a question in here, and I sort of read it quickly, but it was a long explanation about the HEAD data being crowdsourced or not. Could you just explain that a little bit more? I know for this EDC5 where all probe data is considered crowdsourced data for this initiative, and we have some states that are doing some really nice things with the probe data. But you want to explain what your conversation was with?
That was more. I think I put a disclaimer on there that was my opinion, and may not reflect the opinion of the cabinet. But in my opinion, anyway, probe data would be involuntarily reported data. So probe data, in my personal opinion, is not crowdsourcing. Okay, so if you're traveling along the interstate and a sensor picks up your Bluetooth, and then the second sensor picks up another Bluetooth, and it calculates your speed between those, then that's not my idea of crowdsourcing. My idea of crowdsourcing is where people voluntarily report something and offer you their perspective on an event, whether it be on the road or otherwise, Twitter, whatever it may be. That is my personal take on crowdsourcing, is that it would be a voluntary report of an issue, whereas probe data is involuntary and just harvested from different sensors on a vehicle or otherwise.
Okay, so that's your personal opinion. Okay.
Personal opinion, yes. Yeah. Personal opinion, Paul.
Yeah.
You're the one. Hey, this is entrapment. You're asking me.
No, the crowdsourced police will not come after you, but we for this initiative we do consider the NREX and HEAD data.
Sure.
That's crowdsourcing because there is a value in it, and there is sort of
the difference for me is
aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, probe data has been around for a while. The probe data is it's got a lot more use cases, and it's more it's got some more legs on it than what I consider to be crowdsourcing information. So I think taking just somebody's perspective on something and trying to create actionable information out of that is more difficult. There's more gray area. It's really more of an art, if you will, than a science, because you're trying to figure out what the person was seeing or trying to or what their experience was or their perception of the event was versus simple probe reading. So,
Chris, I think you answered this, but because Amy asked, how do you compare Waze weather data versus AVL data to assess if and when ice snow is clear? How do you verify it? Ice snow is clear when customers add Waze after your plow trucks have supposedly cleared the road.
Yeah, our snow and ice operation, it's crazy, it's insane. We we aggregate quite a bit of data, whether it be national weather. We've got 3 or 4 National Weather Service layers of data. We've got AVL data. We've got Waze data. All that is combined into a single segment. So every half mile of roadway on our entire network is broken out, and those reports are kind of stacked on top of that one segment. So we can understand the timestamp of that report versus when we last passed over it, when we plowed it, and when we treated it. And that kind of gives us that timestamp or that chronological order of events. In the future, what I was hoping to do was erase the report after we got to it. That hasn't worked out yet, but we do have about 11 different timestamps on every half-mile segment based on the data sources that we're combining together. So we understand the chronological order of when those things occurred. So I understand that if I see a crowdsourcing report of ice on the road, I know how many trips over top of that we've made, when things happened, et cetera. So it's a much longer conversation than what we have time for today.
Okay. Kristen asked a question, Kelly. I think you alluded to Bing Maps as opposed to other mapping alternatives being an important aspect of the Driver NC Governor website. Would you be able to elaborate more on why?
Yes, I forgot to say that. So when we built our website, we built it on a Bing-based map because we have Microsoft, and Bing is the Microsoft mapping product. So our IT department said, oh, cool, we don't need to do anything. We'll use this Bing map. And even better, we're like, Chris, we're a HERE state, so we use HERE probe data. You can actually just get the HERE probe data as a layer on your Bing map. So they didn't need to integrate the HERE data into our traveler information website. It just came with our subscription or our license or whatever for Bing. Well, here's the problem. When Bing says that something is closed and we say that it's open, we have a conflicting report on our website, right? So it's gone. We called it the candy cane during Hurricane Florence, I think. You would have this candy cane, this red and white crosshash showing that the road was closed, but maybe we had already known that the road was open. So we removed our incident, but the flow information would still be crosshatched. So when we disagree with Bing, it's bad because our website is saying 2 different things. So I figured out that, they use the HERE traffic data and then they use the HERE base map. So when we had a problem, we go to HERE. But the funny story about this is they do some post-processing, right? Bing will only, it's on my chart that I just put up, Bing will only display certain HERE data, has to have a certain level of confidence, or they just go blank. So sometimes people would ask us on our website during the storm, why is there no speed data here? And I'd look at HERE and they would have it, but Bing said, no, there's not enough confidence, so we're not going to publish that. And then they would start to do different things. So I found this email at Bing, and I'm emailing these people, and finally this guy said to me, I don't know who you are, but you have sent more emails in the last 10 weeks than we've gotten in the last 10 years about this mapping stuff. So obviously you're paying incredible attention, but I'm like, well, yeah, because this is our website. This is the state DOT website, and I'm a little bit beholden to Bing to make sure we're saying the same thing. So that's been an interesting experience.
Excellent. John McClellan, I think Chris might have tried to answer it, but John McClellan from Minnesota, has anyone noticed any decrease in the number of Waze reports for incidents? He says, I've noticed that some crashes and some roadway closures that did not generate a Waze event, even though they were Wazes in the area, wondering if new hands-free law has been a deterrent or novelty, has worn off for some folks. Chris has a perspective on that.
Yeah, I was giving more of the technical perspective. We did notice a while back people using hands-free. If you just report hands-free like a crash in Waze, the Waze data feed supplies you a type and a subtype. So the type will be accident, whereas the subtype is major accident or minor accident. In the case of a hands-free report, for whatever reason, when someone reports an accident, it does not contain a type. It only contains a subtype. So if you're looking at it from a data standpoint, and you're not seeing those records, it could be part of the ETL process where you're extracting that data. If you're requiring both of those fields to exist before you report on it, then that's going to cause you a problem. As far as the number of reports decreasing and hands-free law and that kind of thing, I understand that as well. We haven't really noticed that, but I've also not really gone out of my way to try to try to validate that either. So I don't know. I don't know how the hands-free law are affecting the reports coming in from Waze, but I do know you can create hands-free reports through Waze.
Kelly answered. Mike Fitzpatrick asked, are the map edits, say closures, done actively to each provider site or via website feeds of your incident? The latter seems more efficient.
We do
that's
both.
what that column is on that spreadsheet that says how do they interface with us, right? Here just ingested our API, so that makes it a little easier. A lot of the other ones just subscribe to our emails, which isn't quite as elegant. But the process I described, it works well. Maybe 80% of the time it works fine just that way. But it's when you find that problem, how do you then go about, we have a coastal highway NC12, and it's the only way to get to places that people vacation. And so when Google says NC12 is closed and we know NC12 is open or vice versa, we have trouble. So we really have to dig in, and, people are calling, hey, should I cancel my vacation? We had one lady say that, this ruined her honeymoon because she was going there and Google said it was closed and we said it was open and she couldn't get the right information. So it's just when the normal flow of information doesn't work, how do you step in and try to get things fixed quickly?
Yikes! Ruining the ruining next people's lives for sure. Did I miss any questions? Anybody got them all, but I don't know.
I just wanted to mention, if people haven't noticed, Kelly did upload 3 files here in the download pod, so just feel free to download that from there.
So Ed Mark is also asking, is anyone using Waze data for the for after action reviews or analysis of after incidents occur? Does anyone?
Yeah, yes, we use that, Kentucky.
I suspect that there is an opportunity for that. It's a good point, Ed.
Well, let me say one thing. When I posted those files up there, I do ask that if you find something that's wrong or you find better information that you let me know, right? This is kind of sharing, and it's like OpenStreetMaps, right? We're all trying to build this community better together. So if things change, and like for here, for example, I have contacts that do the North Carolina here mapping. If you email them, maybe they'll say, oh, Massachusetts, yeah, here's, Joe Smith who does it for your area. So you might have to start with what I did, and then kind of like my Waze contacts are just my North Carolina Waze contacts. So that won't work for you, but if you email them, they'll say, oh, here's the contacts for your state. So, but please, if you find something that's wrong on there or you have better information, please, get back to me so I can know that that I need to change my stuff.
Yeah,
you can also get active in these communities. For example, like I said, I logged into Discord just to get to know some of the map editors, and I was fortunate enough to have one of the global map editors. He lives in Louisville, Kentucky. But if you notice that actually the screenshot that I have, just by coincidence, had North Carolina group on it. And you can jump in that channel and talk with the editors in North Carolina, and you can make edits to the map. So,
yeah.
These guys are really active. I mean, there's a lot of people that truly enjoy volunteer map editing, and they're very active.
They're wonderful. They came the night of Hurricane Matthew. They drove down here like 45 minutes to our statewide operations center to have a face-to-face conversation. I mean, this is at like 8 o'clock at night. They showed up, and they're like, we just want to, come and ask how we can be helpful. And I'm like, wow, who does this, right? I would take 3 Waze volunteers over 30 DOT employees some days, because these people are passionate, and they just want to do a good job. They love their maps, and they're wonderful. I can't say enough good things about the Waze volunteers.
Wow, I didn't even know that group existed. That's yeah, you can't replace someone that's passionate.
Exactly.
I won't get started on some DOT employees. So
you know what I mean.
I know quite well what you mean, and a lot of them don't know how good they actually have it. But that's a whole other story. But anyway, so one more person, Kristen, is typing, and we have a few more minutes. Any other thoughts, Kelly, Chris? That I think this has been a tremendous session. I really have learned a lot. Appreciate it.
The only other thing I would say is that to be proactive with these communities, because when things do hit the fan, in the case of an emergency event, you're going to wish you had already had relationships with these people. So they're very passionate, and they're very committed to their hobby, and reaching out to them now will help you out later.
Kristen has asked, Chris, what has been the number one value of integrating the data?
Just to understand. So we take those polygons and we also impose those down to the roadway level so that we understand the number of like the inches received on each half-mile segment of roadway, so that we can then compare that later to our salt distribution rates and our clearance times and our recovery times of speed data in that area. So we use it as another form of measuring our performance for snow and ice.
So is it free? Do I just go to this website and just
Yeah.
watch what they're writing?
Yeah, well, Cocoros also supplies a data feed, and so for us, we just grab there's like one for the U.S., and then we filter out all the stuff in Kentucky. Actually, we filter out, I think we drop a 25 or 50-mile buffer around Kentucky, because some of those reports across the border, we also interpolate those as part of our understanding. And then once we do the interpolation of the data, we then push that down to the half-mile roadway segment so that we understand the total snowfall that happened the previous 24 hours, and then we also can go back and look at our snow and ice activity, our actual operations. And our snow and ice coordinator is developing a severity index this year that takes into account wind speeds and dew points and all kinds of forecasted information along with Cocoros. And so we use Kentucky Messinet, which is run by Western Kentucky University. We put a lot of work into snow and ice, and this year is going to be a really, really great year to watch Kentucky for snow and ice.
Now you really jinxed them, now that you said that, Chris.
We won't get any snow, that'll be what happens.
Yeah. So John Grace has asked a question, whichever one of you think is best suited. You probably have perspective on this. He's from an auto company. You get lots of customers reporting things to that call centers, from injured pedestrians to down trees. Is there any data people might want to crowdsource from his auto company? I don't know how to. That one.
Sure.
I think someone else had asked a question too about slowdowns, right? I can't remember where the question was, but like I said, we're a HERE customer, so we're working with HERE to try to figure out, what is the data that the HERE vehicles have? Like maybe it is sudden slowdowns, right? Or maybe it is people put on their windshield wipers or whatever it is. I haven't seen it play out, and I'm not sure anybody's actively using it, but it's that idea that we would be interested. It's kind of like connected vehicles, right? It's really saying the vehicles are probes from whatever thing that they're learning, and how do you get that information back to the DOT? So I think it really is the beginning of connected vehicles.
Yeah, it is the future, I think. I don't think we're close to being there yet, but that, I think, is the future. Yeah.
Geotab offers, they're our AVL vendor for automatic vehicle location for snowplows, and they offer anonymized and scrubbed data for their entire fleet as well. I think they cover UPS and Pepsi, et cetera, but some of our safety guys are really wanting that data, because they can use like anti-lock brakes, ABS. They can look at that and then look at rainfall and understand where they need, maybe they need to study high friction surfaces. Or implement high friction surfaces, and obviously the windshield wiper and other things, when comparing that to Doppler radar and that kind of stuff, really useful for understanding precipitation values versus estimated information. But anyway, yeah, it's all useful information. I mean, a DOT is probably going to use whatever you give them, but we don't, Kentucky, we don't turn away data. I'll say that.
A data person like you. Not everyone has a Chris Lambert.
Yeah, very true.
Or a Kelly Wells. I can tell you that. Steve Levine asked a question, and Kelly already gave him the contact information.
I just gave him the website. Maybe
the website. Chris, do you have
Chris
the
could give him the
contact
contact.
information? Cocoros?
I do somewhere. Just email me and I can try to get that back to
Okay.
you. I don't have it handy.
Yep.
But yes, that's the website.
Okay. Not seeing any more questions. I do think it was a great conversation when we had two great presenters, and seeing any more, I guess we'll call it a day. Nilo, anything to add at the end here?
No, I appreciate you moderating, Paul, and pulling this together, and also really enjoyed both the presentations and the discussions at the end.
As always, the National Operations Center of Excellence has really been a great partner here to Federal Highway. They're hosting the Talking Tim webinars monthly. The next one will be November 19th. November 20th, usually it's the fourth Wednesday of every month, and Center of Excellence is hosting that for us every month. Appreciate that partnership with the Center of Excellence. And if you guys are not familiar with it, I think most of you are, but if you're not, check out their website and everything about operations. You want to know about operations and your support. So with that, everyone have a great rest of your day, giving you back 5 minutes, and thank you so much for participating, and look forward to seeing you on the December 5th webinar on our crowdsourcing, next on our crowdsourcing series. So with that, have a good day, everybody. Take care.